Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to. Wait a minute, I don't know what this is. I think this is Technologist Forum, but it may be the Knowing Agency's uh, live stream podcast. I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna have my guest. Well, I'm the guest. I'm gonna have the host of the show inform me what in the world is actually going on. This is impromptu. Shouts out to July 2nd, early AM. This is what we do. I only do this for a couple of folks, but the person behind the scenes is definitely worth it. Y'all bring your questions because we're going to have a fun, engaging conversation here on the Technologist Forum. Let's go. All right, I don't know what's going on.
I don't
What
know. It's James
you know?
Hicks. I
Huh?
am so happy to have you. I initially invited, my name is Christine Marie, and I am the founder of the Knowing Agency. I am the co founder of Foundation First and the host of the Knowing podcast. And I've got a few other things going on. And I invited James to be on my show. It didn't work out. And so we are on his show with my channels connected, and so we're here today, both of us, and it's a little bit of a funky start. And I just know that sometimes this is exactly setting the stage for an amazing conversation. There was someone else earlier this week. So I've been going live every day since Monday last week, and it's my own little challenge to myself because honestly, there's been a couple of times in my life where I've really wanted something, but I haven't voiced it. I haven't acted accordingly, and really even done things that would allow me to be positioned to receive it. And so one of the things that I wanted previously was to be in a little Hallmark Christmas movie. And so I finally started being brave enough to just start talking about it. And then someone called me 9 months later after I started talking about it and was like, hey, I need a wife. Do you want to come be in this Christmas movie? And so it was, what was it, New Year's Day of 23, I started recording, and we filmed a Christmas movie. And so now in this, the reason why this is applicable is because I actually want to have my own TV show at some point. And I started going live every day last week because I figured if I can at least be faithful with the opportunity that I have at my fingertips to go live every day to practice going live and being authentic, creating that conversation, whether it's just with me or with others, I'm developing and the kind of doing the reps. I'm developing the muscles necessary for when it's time and the opportunity presents itself. And it actually may have presented itself much sooner than I thought. So more information to come on that. But all that to say, James Hicks, I am so grateful for your
Listen,
flexibility this
come
morning.
on now, come on now. My goodness, my
James,
so
man, okay, so if I may, I met you 2 years ago in 23, and I was just so grateful and impressed by your presence. And I mean, true state of being in kind of the virtual forum that you facilitated and you created that was your HMN show 2 years ago. And man, you had done your research. No other podcast host had I ever experienced who had done their, like, literally gone back looking at my Instagram stories to know certain things about me. And I felt so seen and so welcomed by you. And I wanted to kind of have that be the initial conversation starter because it is so rare that we encounter people who know how to know others.
mm,
And so I want to ask you your genesis of that. Like, where did that start for you? How did you first develop that capability of really truly seeing people?
well. Listen, I appreciate that. I'm humbled by that, and that is part of the framework of why I do what I do. So the fact that someone notices that little nuance, right? The fact, like Tall Boy saying, being flexible and being ready, that
Mm,
matters because that resonates, right? Again, it's been a couple of years since we talked face to face. We've communicated in email and we've communicated online because, again, I'm vicariously following you through all your passport stamps. Let me just listen. Christine travels more than I do, and my community knows that I live 35,000 feet in the air. But my goodness, I'm looking one day, and you're in. I'm not okay. I'm not going to put your business out there, but you everywhere, and
traveling the
that
world.
that matters because if we're going to have a conversation, if we're going to have a discussion, these aren't interviews that I do on my channel. They're discussions, and they're opportunities to bring value to not just the folks that are talking, but the folks that are listening as well. So if I
Yes.
hadn't done some research and known about your TV show, known about your organization, known that you focus on empathy and you focus on people understanding how to get out of their own way, and that's what you built your core business on. Uh, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
Right? How are
Right.
we going to connect, and what's going to be the connection? And by
Mm,
taking that literally a little bit of this, and this was before. Listen, this was before AI and before ChatGPT and Claude was so pervasive to where I could have quickly just typed something in. By just putting in that little bit of extra work
yes.
and being
Yes.
conscious on camera, being conscious in the activity as well. Again, that I think that just matters and that just goes a long way. So I appreciate you for that.
Yes, well, and James, I wonder too, obviously, so it's kind of the heart. I want to serve. Is that a fair way to say it? Like serve my
Yeah.
guests, have a good conversation for them, but then honestly, serving the listeners. And I wonder too, to that point, you've been doing this for a long time. How many years have you been doing your show?
The show on camera has been so my story is if there was any blessing of COVID, it was the fact that I paused and said, what do I want to do with this digital publishing and technology consulting piece that was already Hicks New Media? And that was turning on these lights, pressing record, and telling and hearing other people's stories. So
Mm,
whenever, what was that, 2020? Really, when I started focusing on the video aspect, on the direction aspect, on the production pieces as well, and that's when I started reaching out because my wheelhouse is enterprise IT, so bringing
mhm.
in startup founders, bringing in folks that are trying to do the next biggest and best thing, and
Yes.
asking them the hard question of how does this matter, and why should someone pay for your hardware, software, service, whatever the case may be. So long answer short, see, I'm still very long winded.
Oh, but
You know,
it's a story. You're telling a story, which I love.
and you got me up early in the morning too, so and,
We've got you fresh, and
I don't
sometimes
know if it's fresh, but I tell you what, I'm on one for sure. I'm on one for sure. But yeah, since then, because way before then, I was blogging, I was using WordPress, I was doing those types of things. So I was writing the textual piece, but the video and allowing me to do this, right? Allowing me to emote when I'm on stage, I call them the jazz hands, allowing me to show the emotion and to show that aspect. That's really been since COVID.
Mm, mm. What I really respect and appreciate about that is it's the alchemy
Mm,
of so many people stayed small and afraid during that time. Rather, it's how do I really alchemize this? And how do I take what otherwise could be something so damning to my business, damning to growth, to success, to forward momentum, and even going inward and saying, what do I want? It's not just how do I alchemize something bad, but how do I allow for that alchemy to feed into
mm,
who I want to be already in the first place, and what I want in terms of the vision for my life, and because I really do believe, I think that this now comes to a kind of a core critical belief, right? Because there's the internal narratives that we tell ourselves, there's also our core beliefs, and what we tell ourselves and then the action we take as a result of that ultimately at the end of the day are predicated in our belief system. And so it's so important that we're actually aware of what those beliefs are, because for example, if I really do believe that, and I'll go a bit spiritual here for a moment. If I believe that God is good, then I can believe that what is happening will somehow, I can alchemize that for my good. But if I believe that, man, I'm just living in fear, who knows what's going to happen? I'm constantly having to be on alert. I'm constantly having to protect myself. Our actions are going to reflect our belief system. So whether it's something
mm.
spiritual or otherwise, we really have to assess the way that we're living our lives. How does that kind of almost like bring it back home to our core centered belief system? So in terms of that, James, who are you in regards to some of those core beliefs that have drove and impacted your external mannerisms, behaviors,
Yeah.
decisions, actions?
I am the son of military dependents. My father was
Mm,
in the Air Force for 26, 27 years. So I grew up from that aspect,
mm,
respecting others, right? And
yeah,
respecting other cultures, respecting other localities, and being appreciative of what I do and or don't have. Right. Because every
mm,
1 to 2 years of my life, I'm in a different state or I'm in a different country. And having that perspective early on was really key to my upbringing. Now, my extended family, my cousins, my grandparents, and all that, they're still East Coast. They're in the Virginia area, in the
mm,
Washington area, in the Maryland area, things of that. But I'm over here on the left coast. but I still take all of that learning that I learned from them. I still
Mm,
take all of that learning that I acquired from being in Germany, being in Japan, being in wherever the case may be as well. So that's core to me as well. Grew up a
mm.
lot in the church, deeply rooted in faith. You said when God is good, and I say God is good all the time. God is, listen. We can take communion here if you want to, but
My wine. It's only
you know,
7:38 for you.
yeah, listen, but that right there again is core to who I am and my belief because again, do unto others
Yes.
as I would like them
Yeah.
to do unto me. So and living by that, I'm not perfect. Listen, I've fallen by the wayside a couple of times and slipped and fallen, but at the end of the day, I'm focusing on treating people the right way, trying to treat people the right way, trying to advocate. I don't like the word
Mm,
influence. Being in these digital streets, being in these content creation streets, I hate the word influence. But I like
yes.
the word advocate. So I've actually used that in some
Mm,
branding activities because again, if you're doing something in the comments right now, my good friend Tallboy, right? I advocate for someone like that who's out here doing the hard work, getting up
yes.
all day, every day, early morning, late at night, trying to
Yeah.
tweak systems, and I want to be that cheerleader to help when roadblocks come up and things of that. So or putting people
Right.
in touch with others. Christine's looking for
Mm,
someone to talk about X, Y, and Z. Well, I got someone in my Rolodex.
yes.
I think
Right.
I probably just dated myself too with the word Rolodex.
Rolodex. I use that word. So
Just when it came out, I was like, "Oh, wait a minute! These young cats out here don't know what we talk about. They don't remember." Okay, what was the question? The little squirrel moment. But that's it, right? At the core, knowing who I am, where I came from, and
mm,
not deviating. Even
mm,
when, like I say, I'm on stage or something, I don't change. I'm the same cat in front of
mm,
two people, in front of 20,000 people, whatever the case may be. I'm the same persona. I don't code switch. And I think it's a lot easier for me to just be me, right? As
yes.
opposed to trying to pretend to be something else. So if I can just show up and be who I am,
Mm.
it's a lot it's a lot less friction,
Yeah. Well, and
right?
who was it? A friend of mine was like, at some point, I just stopped being anyone other than me because I got tired of lying and trying to remember who knew me as what.
Yeah,
You know, it was
right.
almost like the
That's
circle
tough,
got too
right?
big, and it's like, never mind, I quit. Trying to remember all of those different elements. I James, to that point, that is such it's almost a superpower, authenticity is. To be able to show up as you and to be so rooted and aligned with who you are. But my question is, what was your story of getting to that point of knowing?
I don't know if it was one particular instance, but it was just more of a collection of activities, right? Again, just
Mm,
realizing that, and I'll just compile what I was just saying. Just realizing that as I show up, I want to show up authentically. I want to
mm,
show up with purpose. I want to show up with reason for engagement. Right, I'm trying to bring value, right? If I got you like on camera for 60 minutes, I want to make sure that 60 minutes, at least 50 minutes of that is valuable and you're getting ready to take something from that.
yeah,
So the root in just me understanding that it matters to show up and to be myself is just a
mm,
collection of my upbringing. It's a collection of my family. It's a collection of my close circle of friends. I got a lot of
mm,
acquaintances. Only got a
mhm.
couple of friends.
Yeah,
Uh,
me
so
too.
so again, just and knowing when it's time to cut some of those folks off, right? So again, that's why that circle gets a lot smaller as well over time, right? Okay, it's a different season for me, so I may not want to hang out with those folks and do some of those things that I did back in my early 20s,
Mhm,
early 30s, or whatever. I'm not going to keep going
right.
up because I don't want folks to know again how old I am.
Well,
But
how
no,
young you are.
no, knowing those types of things. So I know I'm not giving you a straight answer but it's very complex person, right? A
Mm,
very complex person who actually struggles daily to keep things in tune.
mm,
So we can have an introspective conversation about that because there's so much going on this planet right now, and it's hard to
yeah.
maintain.
Yes.
It really is, and I struggle with this. And again, some my close friends and family know this. Trying to maintain and trying to stay positive, glass half full, instead of It's all coming to right. I'm
Yeah.
struggling with this on a day to day basis of trying to stay again grounded in who I am, who I was, where I come from, and not going
Mm,
off of the cliff
yeah.
and not being afraid to walk out of my front door. So
Mm,
that's a constant struggle. So I don't have that part of your, I don't have that answer to that part of your question. I just know up until this point, it's like a daily
interesting.
introspection of
Yes.
taking it one moment at a time,
Yes.
and knowing what I can and cannot control. That right there, that's the
Right.
conversation that I have with myself every single hour. Lord, what's
Mm,
happening on CNN right now? What's happening on CNBC or whatever
mm,
case? I can't mess with that. That's out of my
yeah. Yeah.
control. I can do this within my sphere of influence, but I'll
Mm,
deal with what I can from those different aspects. And again, I know that was a
mm.
long-winded response, but that
No,
drives
that
me
was great.
daily.
Yes. Well, and so this question of what can I control in relation to, and to your point of, you've done the work to know who you are to this point, and you've done James, a lot of people have not done that work. And for those of you who just joined, we were just talking about how James has cultivated the ability to really know who he is and present himself authentically, because that is a superpower. And that ultimately is what everyone wants and what everyone needs. And I remember a couple years ago, my before I really did my own work to know who I am, my therapist told me effectively, it's a two-way street. You have to know who you are in order to thus present yourself to be known, because I was so hungry and pressing and searching for connection with other people, even my former husband at the time, and I showed up as a phantom of who everyone else wanted me to be. And I had no roots and no core self that was rooted and grounded in who I was created to be in the first place. And I was just so kind of disconnected from that person because I was so fixated on everyone around me. I think of it as a compass. My compass was navigated east and west rather than pointed north, because I was so fixated on the horizontal rather than being vertically aligned. And who am I connected to be first? Who am I made to be first? And then I can proceed outward and connect with others from that place of knowing. And so James really does come across and has this very authentic presence because of the work he's done to know his past and know how that shows up today. And knowing our past is incredibly important. And
Mm.
in so knowing, we get to decide, I want to take these pieces and these parts I'm going to leave behind, and thank it and bless it and move forward. And so
Man.
James, do you have anything to say on that? I saw you kind
Well,
of
I'm
poke
when
up
I
a
go
little bit.
off camera, I'm really taking notes because folks, this is why I rock with Christine. Listen, she fancy, she high end, right? Using big words, I'm over here. Lord, y'all pray for me. Uh, but having
I
real
love you.
conversations, real introspective conversations. Uh, I used to have a show on my channel called Conscious Conversations, right? And again,
Mm-hmm.
trying to rise above the noise. Well, not trying,
Mm,
but actually rising above the noise and having conversations about stuff that matters. And
mm,
what you're doing on your show, what you've been doing with the Knowing Agency, right? Again,
mm,
is talking about empathy, talking about
mm-hmm.
getting out of your own way, but talking about finding your path and your purpose, and
Yes.
what drives you. And I think unfortunately we don't have enough of those conversations in today's world, and especially here again in these digital streets. So I'm thrilled that you're doing what you're doing, because it's a void, it's a gap that needs to be filled. You're the right person, I think, to fill it, because you understand the peaks and the valleys of what really, you've gone through it. Right, I'll
Mm,
put it that way. You've gone through some things and you've come out on the other side pretty cool. And being able
mm,
to sit in a room and tell that story, that allows other folks to get comfortable with sharing their
mm, mm-hmm.
vulnerabilities as well. So there's some
I
flowers to
love
you
it.
on this Friday. What is it?
Oh,
I thought it was Friday. It's only good Lord have mercy. I don't know what's going on. What's
well, and some
happening
flowers
today?
back to you, James, because there is, that's actually a really, really interesting point you made. Like, we can show up authentically, but if we don't have the ability to draw other people out,
Hmm.
then, it's, well, and what's the point of authenticity? What's the point of knowing? I actually was thinking about this the other day. Why do we know who we are? Why does it matter how we show up? And it really is for the purpose of connection and for the purpose of creation. Because if I'm showing up in an authentic way and you're showing up in an authentic way, and then we exchange empathy for the other person's experience, now I get to sit in your experience and look at the world through your eyes. and you get to sit in mine and look at the world through my eyes. And man, now I have just doubled my intelligence because I can now see things through your experience. And now I've just added layers upon layers of depth and weight, even though I haven't lived it. But empathy allows us to grow without having to move through the thing itself. It's really, really powerful
Yeah.
if we know how to alchemize empathy.
And you have to be willing to, and I apologize for interrupting, but I think
No,
you got to
please.
be willing to receive that,
Mm.
because
Hmm.
we see a lot of times in instances in this entrepreneurial journey, in these uh, business streets, there's a lot of crabs in the barrel.
Yeah.
And if you're doing good, and we're kind of maybe doing similar, not same thing. How come
Yeah. Yeah.
how come I'm not thriving as well? Well, she can't be doing all that good. Let me go over there and do some negative reviews on Yelp or wherever,
Oh,
right? And say, nah, she all right. She's not that right. Well, why do we have that type of outpouring of energy when
yes.
all you trying to put food on your family's table and feed yourself and do better? And I think if we're willing to receive that, it's just so much better for everyone
Wow.
involved.
That's so incredibly meaningful. If we were to question our own energy output rather than judging others, it's kind of like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like what they're doing, and I'm really reacting to it. What is going on in me? That's
Yeah.
radical responsibility. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not doing something wrong. That doesn't mean that they need to not be held accountable. And maybe they're not, but first, it's that biblical concept of take the log out of your own eye first so that you can see clearly what's going on over there. But until I know what's going on here, I'm never going to be able to have the wisdom and the we think about intelligence, y'all. There's intellectual intelligence, the IQ, the intellectual quotient. There's the emotional intelligence, EQ. And having both of those working in concert together allows us to see so much of a bigger picture. And I talked about, kind of the spiritual element earlier. I actually talked about this on Sunday. I love talking about kind of more spiritual, existential things, but it's so personal to me that I've never really publicly talked about it aside from Sunday. So Sunday I talked about a spiritual intelligence. Y'all, we have access to our emotions, to our intellect, and to our spirit if we're able and willing to take the time to cultivate those intelligences. And then we get to experience the world with all three of those intact. And then we get to see people through their eyes because of the empathy through our EQ. We get to see them kind of almost like with the mind and the intellect based on what we know of the world and data, and we're able to exchange based on our own learnings, right? Kind of on a very tactile level. But then we're also able to see them through God's eyes, the spiritual lens, the spiritual intelligence. So when all of our intelligences are activated, we get insight into ourselves and insight into other people that we never otherwise would. But all three of those need to be working in concert together. We can't just be walking around with our IQ activated because we're going to be missing out on the emotional connection that we can have with other people. And even sometimes there's something going on that's so unseen, like maybe someone just lost their parent or
Yeah.
their child, and we have no idea that maybe that's why they're being a little nasty to us. And if all we're doing is engaging with our IQ, we're just gonna be like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
kind of
that's that
rightfully,
constant struggle I was talking about, right? Again, hour
yes.
by hour, by trying to, all right, maybe my neighbors got something else going on, and I
Mm,
gotta try to put myself into their shoes without flying off the handle all the time. But man,
mm,
it's very easy. It's a lot easier said than done. And again, it's a
yes,
conscious effort. It's a conscious activity.
yes,
Lord ain't through with me yet, so I'm trying to get there. But
yeah.
it,
And to your point about conscious activity, Tallboy just said, then we can grow together.
mm-hmm.
We have to, if we're conscious and activating our intelligences, we can do that very thing. And it's almost like an invitation, like, hey, will you grow with me? Can we do life together? And it is sometimes it's really vulnerable to ask that because they could say no. And to your point, we can't control what they say. And I think that's terrifying, especially if we're going to be authentic and vulnerable to say, hey, can we grow together? We can't control the outcome and the output of their response. So how have you engaged with that? Like when you do show up authentically, how do you how do you mitigate the fear of what you cannot control?
How do I mitigate the fear? I no longer look at the audience and pretend they're all naked, right, when in front of a show. I don't do that anymore. I used to do that many years ago. Okay, you can cut that out, add that, put that to like a blooper reel or something. Um, I lock in and realize that it's not that big a deal, right?
Mm,
I realize
wow.
that the grandeur of what's
Chills.
going on, right? Who
That's
I'm affecting,
so
what I'm talking about is important,
yes.
but it's not that big a deal in the full grand scheme of things. What's most important is the folks that live at this address, the folks that live three
Mm,
miles down the road. That's where my parents lived. Right. So, I mean, that's what's most important as
mm,
opposed to the next like, the next subscribe, the next piece of content, the
yeah,
next consulting session, whatever. I mean, they're important, but keeping things in perspective is
mhm,
very much again another conscious effort. So before get on stage, right, go to the bathroom, stand in front of the mirror, do some breathing exercises, shake it off, kind of stuff, and then go out there, do the thing, find a few people in the audience and lock in on their face
yeah,
visually, right? So go through all of those steps that we learn from a schooling perspective, but
right,
realizing that if you look at everything from A to Z, if you look at what the contribution that you're making at this particular point, yes, I want to do what my old boss did, and I want to put a
mhm,
dent in the universe. My old
mm,
boss who said that, Steve Jobs, again, dating myself, right? I do want to go out there and put a dent in the universe, but I do understand that the universe is incredibly large, and my contribution
mm.
is minuscule as compared to some other things out there. So keeping everything in perspective, very conscious activity. Can't do it right all the time. I trip and
Mhm.
fall sometimes as well, but having that framework and frame of mind helps with not being too big for the situation if the situation isn't that big, if that makes sense.
I think well, that resonated so much with me, and if we think about what you so for those of you who just joined, James is saying effectively, I asked him, what does he do? What's a practice that he does to help mitigate fear over what he can't control? And y'all, control is something that I think we all are grasping for. I mean, even as kids, we're born into this world as mini narcissists. We're screaming for what we want. And that doesn't really change. It's just a different tactic we use today trying to get what we want. And this fear over not being able to control, I almost had this like visual a couple weeks ago over like what I feel that when I feel that fear, I actually just tighten my grip. I actually try to hold on tighter, and man, does that just make it all worse. And so I asked James, what's a practice he does? And James, you mentioned a couple of things, but at the end of the day, what I really appreciated and what resonated so deeply with me was when you said, just almost don't, it's not that big of a deal. Like, keep it in perspective, whether it's going on stage, whether it's honestly, maybe even some bigger things, like maybe you're going out for that new job. But if we kind of take the fear and bring it under the limelight and say, okay, what is the actual worst that could happen at
Yeah.
the job? And you're like, okay, it's not that bad. Like, life goes on and it's gonna be
I'm
okay.
gonna
But
spill my coffee all over my face. That's the worst that can happen. All right, I can come up with a cool joke to talk about. All right,
exactly,
let's move on. All right, yeah.
exactly. Yes.
So that's the worst that can happen. I can fall off the stage. Okay, you got a
Okay,
blooper
and then
reel.
it's a story, and
Yeah.
it's really actually asking that question, "What's the worst that can happen?" It kinda just it takes the smoke out of our imagination, because I think the
Mm.
unspoken imagination is really where the fear lies. But if we can bring it into the limelight, ooh, fear is a curtain. I love that. Focus on the reward behind the curtain. I love it. So it's kind of like, okay, let's strip away the curtain. Let's pull back the veil and see, okay, let me touch the veil. Let me touch fear, engage with it, realize what is really going on, and not let our subconscious, not let our imagination be the one in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Because the more you've been talking about consciousness this whole time, the more we bring our subconscious into consciousness and can analyze those narratives, because fear always has, kind of the roots of fear are disconnection or rejection. And that all comes back to like, we just want to be connected with other people. Like, we really need to, Top Boy said this, grow together, And so if we can just recognize it's not what's the worst that can happen, and then touch and engage with fear rather than letting fear have its hold over us where we're becoming subservient. Rather, we're the ones in the driver's seat. We're conscious over what those narratives are. James, I love that. Another thing you said in relation to kind of what do you do to conquer fear, you said deep breathing. And you take a few deep breaths. Y'all, that is something that has been so helpful for me. We are not raised on how to manage our emotions. We're not raised with EQ tools. We're solely focused on the IQ in school. And so, with that deep breathing, can you just talk a little bit about that? It's not hard, it's not complicated or fancy, and it has big ramifications.
Yeah, I mean, it's a conscious activity, it's a conscious effort before any session, before any conversation, before anything that
Mm,
needs me to emote specific types of
yeah.
information. I will do three successive deep breaths. I will go through that, and again, it's a conscious activity. I will do the three deep breaths, and that last exhale. That's when
Mm,
it's go time. That's when that's
mm.
when it's Tom Brady, LFG, right? Right. That's when we go
I
out
love
and do the thing after we've inhaled, exhaled, and then prepared ourselves mentally,
Mhm,
spiritually, physically for
mm,
the next activity. So
mhm,
if I don't do that, I have noticed every now and then that I will either stumble, I will have it won't be as crisp. It's not
mhm,
always about the production piece, right? So it doesn't always have to be crisp. But again, I just if I don't pause, do that little bit of meditation with myself for
mhm,
myself
mhm.
before doing any activity,
Right. Yeah,
it
yeah.
won't be 100%. It'll be 95, 98%, whatever the case may be. But again, if I don't take that moment for myself to inhale,
Mm,
exhale, and three successive times. That's I live in threes, I guess. But
yeah.
and do that activity, and then let's
Yes.
go. Let's turn the lights on. Let's press record. Let's do the thing. So
Mm. I love it. It's almost like a returning because we can live so much extended outward.
yeah,
For those of you who just joined, I gave the example earlier of just living so much horizontally focused. Okay, who do you all need me to be? All right, cool. I'll go be that person for you
yeah,
rather than, okay, let me lead from a really centered core place where I'm calm, I'm peaceful. Davidson's all natural gym. I don't know your name, sir, but I see, or woman, but Davidson's all natural gym.
that's
He just
John.
made a say again.
That's John. That's John. He's a good man. That's a good dude. So
John, you just said never give anyone the power to control your emotions. And y'all, that is so incredibly important. That process of deep breathing, almost like if we close our eyes, because I like closing my eyes when I take a couple deep breaths, just to kind of like
hmm
go inward and then go outward. Let me just make sure that I'm actually really truly centered to be operating from that place because then I'm not giving them control over me. I'm the one in control.
yeah.
And that's incredibly,
Well,
incredibly.
don't close your eyes if you're like driving and doing a Zoom
I don't know,
call.
James. Maybe, no, Jesus,
I'll
take
just
the wheel.
let's put that caveat out there. Let's put that disclaimer out there because I'm taking Zoom
We don't
calls in
want
the
to get in
car.
trouble.
I do the breathing, but don't close. Even though the car will drive us, okay, we won't get into all that. Okay, Jesus.
Oh my gosh. James, I am so grateful for this conversation today. I know we were supposed to be on another platform, but this is perfect. And I'm so grateful. You have such a strong community here. Everybody showing up on across different platforms. You're
On the
you're so
fly too.
well.
Lord have mercy, folks just showed up on the fly. What's up with y'all?
I
Okay,
know. Well, and you're so well loved. And that really speaks to the power of authenticity, y'all. We need to be building a brand that's predicated on who we are, not who they want us to be. And
Mm,
so, James, you've just done such a beautiful job of that. And I respect you and am grateful for you, my friend. So thank you
thank you.
for joining me today.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I look forward to. I know we're back and forth on a couple of channels right now, and folks in my community. John was asking, do you have a website? I will make sure that the knowingagency.com and even the podcast and all those things are in the
Yeah, thank
description.
you.
I will make sure that folks know how to get in touch with you. And she's probably one of the coolest IG follows as well, folks, because again, every week. This young lady is in a different time zone, you know, eating crepes in front of, okay, let's leave that alone. Y'all, okay, if you had value from this, let me know. If you did not find value from this, let me know as well. Let's
Let
be
me know
streaming.
too.
Yeah, let me know. Well, all right, we out, y'all. Appreciate you.
All right.